What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV back here for some more preview shows for you guys today. We are with Johnny from Newcastle Fans TV to build up the anticipation for the big game at St James's Park this weekend. Big top four clash. Johnny, how are you doing, my friend? And you must be getting nosebleeds, so dizzy heights up there.
Oh, well, it feels like when the away fans are up in the gods, that's how much of a nosebleed I'm getting at this moment in time. It's been absolutely fantastic. It's been such a turnaround in the last 12 months. I was just saying before we started that this time last year we were giving you Champions League football after we beat Arsenal, and now we're fighting for Champions League football with you, which I don't think anybody or any Newcastle fan would have imagined this time last year. But we certainly have a lot of confidence, and I think there's a desire between the whole club, as in the owners, the fans, the players, that we're going to get there. But there's still some work to do.
Yeah, I mean, we've been speaking, us as channels for a long time now. I think it's been 5 or 6 years, and throughout that time, you've been pretty much fighting relegation, pretty much that whole time. You must be pinching yourself to see where you are right now, and it's probably the first time since we've been doing these channels that you're probably coming into this game as favourites.
Yeah, I just had a little look beforehand, and Newcastle are favourites in this game, which is probably the first time Newcastle have been favourites against Spurs for such a long time. But you're quite right. It's been bizarre because when we do these previews or we do after game reactions, it's generally well done, Tottenham. You've done well. You've beaten us again, or there's been the odd occasion when we have had that upset where I think Joe Linton scored at the Spurs stadium, which was obviously a bit surreal. Let's be honest, but yeah, it's always been, can we make sure that there's three worst teams than us at the end of the season? But now, is there 3 teams better than us at this moment in time? It's really remarkable. But yeah, it's a massive game on Sunday. But I just love the fact there's such a confidence. Every time that before this takeover happened, it was a case of, if there was any news in regards to Newcastle, it was always kind of like other teams fans were taking the nick, because there was always a bit of a comedy going up at St James's Park. But now we've been taken very, very seriously, and I love it, because it just means that we're actually becoming a proper football club again, kind of almost a football club we once were under Sir Bobby and Kevin Keegan back in the day. But now it's a case of, no, we are staying here, and we'll be proving that every single season.
Yeah, Newcastle, they're on great form at the moment, by and large, and they come into this with a lot of momentum. But you obviously did have that setback last week against Aston Villa with a 3-0 defeat in a very uncharacteristic performance, you have to say. When you're looking at that game, do you think it's just going to be a blip, or were there worrying signs maybe in that game that it could be more than just a blip?
I hope it's just a blip. But the common theme, we had 3 away games in a row, West Ham, Villa and Brentford. And the common theme is we didn't start very well. We didn't start the games very well at all. We got away with it against West Ham because West Ham are very good at football at this moment in time. And we were 2-0 after 15 minutes, but we didn't deserve to be 2-0 after 15 minutes. Brentford could have been 3-0 at half time against Newcastle, but we turned it around second half. But we certainly deserved what we got against Aston Villa. It could have been 3 or 4-0 at half time. Jacob Ramsey hit the crossbar. Nick Pope's made some really, really good saves, and it was a bit disappointing. However, I do feel like it's just a blip, because I feel that now that was 3 away games. We're back at St James's Park. 5 of our last 8 are at St James's. Only Liverpool have beaten us at home this season. I just think at home we're just a different animal, and I don't think many teams have really coped with that this season in terms of opposition. So I think that Newcastle will go into this game with confidence, and I think they'll want to prove to everybody that Aston Villa game, as you say, was just a blip.
And when you're looking at us coming into, obviously we've been fighting for top 4 for a while now, but in terms of this season, from an outsider looking in, what perspective do you have on Spurs?
I can't work Spurs out. I really, really can't.
Who can?
I know. The reason why I say I can't work Spurs out, you had arguably one of the best managers in the Premier League, with one of the best strikers. I'd say the best striker in the Premier League in terms of an all-round package. I know Haaland's had an incredible season, but if you're taking all the strikers in the Premier League and what do you want from a striker? Harry Kane is your man. You bought well in the summer. Everybody agreed that Tottenham probably had the best transfer window, and it's just not worked. And I just don't get how it hasn't worked, because you've got everything there to make it work. But like I say, football's a funny old game. I think if someone said to me this time last year, Arsenal will be top of the Premier League and Spurs will be fighting for top 4, I'd be like, I don't know. Like, I would have thought it been the other way around, because you've got the manager, you've got the players. If you can get a bit of a run going, then Spurs will be good. But I just think it's been problem after problem after problem. I think obviously the manager, it just hasn't worked out as well as Tottenham fans would have liked. I think there's been defeats that you just wouldn't expect. And I think you spent £60 million on Richarlison, who hasn't scored a Premier League goal this season. We spent £60 million on Alexander Isak, and he's hardly played. In terms, I think he's played 14 games for Newcastle and scored 8 goals. That just shows kind of where Tottenham are right now. If you don't buy well, even though everyone thought that they did, and if they don't get up and running, it makes a massive difference. But I do worry for Spurs. I'm not going to lie. I really do worry for Spurs, because if they don't make Champions League this season, where are they going to finish next season?
Yeah.
Because the likelihood is you're not going to have Harry Kane. Whoever comes in as manager, I think that's a massive appointment as well, by the way, because if you just remember 2 years ago, you had Nuno Espirito Santo as your manager, who should never have been anywhere near that job, let's be honest. But if you don't get this managerial appointment right, and if you don't buy well in the summer, and you're probably going to lose Harry Kane, and Chelsea and Liverpool aren't going to have bad seasons that they've had, where did Spurs are looking at mid-table, in my opinion, because there doesn't seem to be a plan there. I don't know what Daniel Levy's doing, really, to be honest. If I was a Spurs fan, I'd be going mental at him, because it just seems to be bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, and it just seems that they're more interested in stuff behind the scenes rather than football.
And you know a lot about having bad owners with Mike Ashley a long time, and there are lots of protests surrounding him. Obviously, the ownership has changed at Newcastle, and now things are looking different. So tell me about how it's changed, like maybe the atmosphere with the fans, and maybe the culture of the club under these new owners, and maybe is that something Tottenham should be pushing for, or their current owners, maybe similar thing that it's gone a bit stale, albeit it was quite a different scenario with Levy and Ashley. People would argue maybe Levy change the club in a different way, and for the better way. That Ashley never really did that at all at Newcastle. But that stagnation where it just feels the same, like Groundhog Day every year, Newcastle were definitely feeling that. And now that was all changed. So tell us about that.
Yeah, you're certainly right. Look, the one word that we had was hope, that we just didn't have. We didn't have any hope. It was a case of every season, can we just make sure we finish 17th or higher? And that was the case. And it was a good season in terms of what Mike Ashley thought. Newcastle fans wanted a little bit more, and that's what every football fan should deserve. They should deserve to dream and have a bit of ambition to, before this takeover, Newcastle should have had a dream of finishing top half and maybe, knock on the door for the Conference League. But there was just no interest. We barely did anything in the Cups. I think we had one quarter final in the last 10 years. We always used to get beaten the third and fourth round. There's just no desire to improve. And it's just a completely different football club right now. I don't know if you're going to the game this weekend, but this city will be absolutely buzzing this weekend. And it has done since the takeover. There's been no game where it hasn't been sold out, because there's just so much demand for tickets. Like, we just had the ticket release for the Arsenal game, which I hope we win, so we stop them winning the league, let's be honest. But I think there's 28,000 people trying to get a ticket for that game.
Wow. And
like you say, you've got 40,000 odd season ticket holders. The ground's not big enough anymore. It's just not. So there is a demand. The city's just so different. It's just an amazing place to be at this moment in time. We just need a bit more investment around the city. But look, you just think with the owners that we've got right now, I know there's always going to be question marks about the Saudis, and I completely understand that point. But in terms of the people that are running the day-to-day operations of the football club, we've got one of the best in the business in Dan Ashworth, Amanda Staveley, and Mia Dagatusi really, really care about the football club, and we've got one of the best CEOs in Darren Eales, because he just knows how to relate to football fans and knows how to relate to football people around the world. And we're becoming a professional football club. It's just taken 15 years to get there.
It'd be interesting to get your perspective on this. Back on Daniel Levy and Mike Ashley, right? You've been there, done it. You got your owners out. It took you a while. But, there is a growing disgruntlement in the Spurs fan base with the ownership, with Daniel Levy. A lot of fans, or a percentage of the fan base, wanting them out. And there's small pockets of protest starting to happen now. I mean, what advice would you give to Spurs fans? Because obviously you've been there in that moment, and you've pushed those owners out. So what would your advice be to the Spurs fans?
We did a number of different things, and some worked, some didn't work. I'm not going to lie. We had protests. I remember we played Spurs a few years ago. I think it was 2015, and I think we had about 30,000 in the ground, or just under 30,000 in the ground. It was a protest. It was a sense that we want the eyes of the world to be on Newcastle, which the Premier League is when you're on television every single game now, and you kind of got to hurt them in their pockets essentially, and then like you say, you look at the Super League, for example. There was big protests for that, but if you really want an owner out, you've kind of got to stay away from the club, or you've kind of got to hurt them in their pocket, which is not going to games, by not buying merchandise. And some will argue saying that's not really going to impact them when they're getting billions or millions from Premier League money and TV money. But the Premier League's product doesn't want to see empty stadiums. You know, when Newcastle and Rafa Benitez parted company, Newcastle United fans, 10,000 Newcastle United fans gave up the season ticket. Now that is a lot for a Newcastle United fan to do, to give up the season ticket. You know, work Monday to Friday, they want to watch the team, and 10,000 people gave that season ticket up because they just couldn't see any direction. Now, I think it's like subtly different for Spurs. Spurs in the last 10 years really have always been a top 6, top 7 club. They've had the moments where, the Champions League final, and Pochettino done absolute wonders with that football club, and you thought this club's going somewhere. But there becomes a point where a certain owner or a certain managing director can only take the club so far. Daniel Levy, in my opinion, can only take Tottenham so far. And Tottenham, if Tottenham want to try and win trophies, I think he's only won 1 trophy since he's been there in terms of him being involved in the football club. Yeah. Is that enough really for Tottenham Hotspur? I don't think so. Personally, I'm not a Tottenham fan.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely spot on.
And it's interesting when you look at the state of the two clubs right now. Obviously, if I would have asked you this question 18 months ago, you probably would have laughed at me. But if Newcastle do finish in that Champions League spot this season, and which is most likely ahead of Tottenham right now, because Spurs don't look anywhere near enough like they're going to snatch that Champions League spot, do you look at both clubs and really believe that Newcastle are now maybe a bigger draw than moving to Tottenham? And when you're competing for players in the transfer market, like with a Tottenham, you can really throw your weight around, especially financially, and think like, actually, when we can actually compete with these clubs now, and not only compete, that we actually might be the bigger draw now when it comes to competing for maybe the bigger players.
I think Spurs will always have a pull because of being in London, because it's Spurs, it's a big club. Of course, there's always going to be a pull and an attraction to Tottenham. But if I was a James Maddison, for example, right now, who's been linked with both football clubs, and if Newcastle have got Champions League in their back pocket, now that's such a massive thing for football players. Declan Rice wants to leave West Ham, and I don't blame him. And he probably wants Champions League football as well. And I'm not saying we're going to get both of those players, but if I'm James Maddison, for example, who's been linked with both clubs, the only attraction really from a Tottenham point of view is maybe playing with a Harry Kane and really playing with some players like him. But if he's going to go at the end of the season, he's obviously going to have it's a bigger pull than Leicester. Of course it is, because Leicester are in the relegation, so Tottenham will probably be somewhere in the top half. But who knows until a new manager comes in. I think with Newcastle, it's a safer bet right now. You've got a manager that everybody knows it can improve players, and everybody trusts him at this moment in time. We've got players like Alexander Isak, Bruno Guimaraes, Sven Botman, Alan St-Maximin. You want to play with those players? You want to play with those players? And if we're going to add to that as well in the summer, I would find it very, very difficult. It's very difficult because I've got my Newcastle hat on, you've got your Tottenham hat on. But I would want to rather go to Newcastle at this moment in time. And that's obviously me being biased, but it's a difficult one. Everyone will have their own reasons. Some people might just want to live in London. Obviously, London is a big attraction for some players. You've seen clubs like Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal nick players from clubs like Liverpool, for example, over the years, and other clubs in the north because it's the pull of London. But that's probably the only thing.
One question I want to ask you about the owners, like, you got that new ownership obviously 18 months ago, and everyone expected when these new owners came in that you'd be like splashing the cash, spending hundreds of millions, and you spend money, but it's not like being outrageous. I would argue that Newcastle spend. You kind of spend it smartly, spend it on very specific players. When you look at a team like Chelsea, who in the summer also got new ownership, but have spent money maybe how people expected you to spend it. That's probably what people expected of Newcastle. How Chelsea has spent the money in the last 2 windows outrageously, and they've kind of had no plan, no strategy. Like, when you look at Chelsea and all the money they've spent, are you kind of happy the way you've gone about your business, just very smartly going through getting signings in, not spending too much money, or maybe did you expect some more money to be spent?
I think nobody knew what we were going to expect, to be honest with you, because This was completely foreign to us. It was completely different to us. I was surprised in terms of the fact that we didn't make loads of signings in the summer. But what we did was we identified key targets. Sven Botman was our number one centre-back target. We went out and got him. We got Bruno Guimaraes in the January of last year, who's been an absolute revelation. He was our number one target. We got him. Alexander Isak was our number one target, and we got him. We just managed to get the players that we actually identified as our number one targets throughout the summer. Nick Pope, what a revelation. I think he's only cost us, I think it was £10 million altogether, but I think we're only paying Burnley £3 million last summer for him in instalments, and he's had the most clean sheets in the Premier League. So it's not how much money you spend, it's how you actually spend it. I think that's the problem. And if you look at Chelsea, Mudryk hasn't done anything since he started. I'm just trying to think. I think the only player that you'd say has done okay is Enzo, but
and João Felix potentially.
Yeah, potentially as well. But again, Chelsea have always been that club since Abramovich came in. They spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds. Newcastle are going to do it slightly differently. However, if Newcastle do get Champions League, it's already been muted across the press in the last few days that Newcastle are going to spend big. They're going to spend big on 4 big players. Now, Declan Rice has been mentioned, Mason Mount's been mentioned, Victor Osimhen has been mentioned. These are big players now. This isn't Hamza Chowdhury on loan anymore. So, we couldn't get that deal done over the line, which I'll not go into and bore you with. But Newcastle, I think, will have their own targets. James Maddison, of course, is a massive target for Newcastle United. They really, really like him. And if Leicester get relegated or even Leicester stay up, they will make an offer for him. But we will wait and see. We'll wait and see. But I think it'll be an exciting summer. If Newcastle make the Champions League, Newcastle fans just need to literally hold on to their seatbelts because they have no idea who we're going to bring in, but they're going to be good.
And that's the kind of one of the differences between Newcastle and Spurs. You know, the criticism between Daniel Levy over the years has been we never get our number one target. We always end up going for the third and the fourth and the fifth target, penny pinching. And that's why a big reason why we're in the mess that we're in right now. You know, just in the summer, you know, we wanted a Bastoni or a Gvardiol. We got Clement Longley on loan at left centre-back in a very key area for us this season. So that is definitely a big source of frustration for Spurs fans. But let's finish off on your thoughts on the game this weekend and what is your score prediction? How do you think the game's going to go?
I don't think Newcastle will lose this weekend. I still think it'll be a tough game. Spurs have got some good players. Kane still worries me. Son's come back into a little bit of form, but obviously he's not the player that he was last season where he was absolutely exceptional. But he's still a worry. He's still a threat. But Newcastle just have everything going for them at this moment in time. Apart from that defeat last week, we've won 5 out of our last 6. They're sitting in the top 4. And we're kind of treating this as a Champions League playoff, if I'm honest. That's how we're seeing it. I think if we win on Sunday, we're 6 points clear with a game in hand, and the fact that Spurs have got Man United and Liverpool to come after that, and we've got Everton and Southampton who potentially could both. Well, Southampton will definitely be in the bottom 3. Everton may be in the bottom 3. You'd like to think Newcastle will get more points than Tottenham with the next 2 games after that. So, if Newcastle win, I would take a draw. I'll be honest, I would take a draw because it keeps that gap, and the fact that you've got those 2 games, as we've mentioned, after Newcastle against Man United and Liverpool. I think that as long as Newcastle don't lose, we will see that as a really good result. But I think Eddie Howe doesn't go for draws. Eddie Howe goes for wins, and I think we will win.
Talk about Eddie Howe. Do you think he could be a future England manager, considering how well he's done at Newcastle?
Yeah, 100%. I hope it's not in the next couple of years, mind. Hope Gareth Southgate can keep on doing just enough from a biased Newcastle fan. But yeah, he certainly has the credentials. He's still quite young in terms of as a football manager, and I think a couple of clubs missed a trick on him, if I'm honest, because I think a lot of clubs,
including us, probably,
possibly, yeah, and I think a lot of people probably thought, oh, it's the guy that relegated Bournemouth, but he's a football nut. He's addicted to football. I would fully recommend to watch the High Performance podcast with him and Jay Comfrey. It was towards the start of the season, and that kind of opened our eyes as fans to go, ooh, he's really, really serious about being a fantastic football manager. And if he can keep on doing what he's doing at Newcastle, if he can get the experience of being in the Champions League, for example, like I can't remember the last time there was an English manager in the Champions League who got a team to the Champions League. Let's be honest. I think
Harry
it might be Harry Redknapp. Yeah, exactly. Harry Redknapp may have done that. And then obviously Chelsea did what they did. So I know it was the year before because he's beat like Milan, didn't he? All the Milan teams or something like that. But which I'm a bit jealous of. But no, yeah. I think Newcastle can win. I think Newcastle got enough, especially in midfield. I think that's a huge battle. I think if it's Bruno, Joe Linton, and Sean Longstaff playing in midfield, or maybe Joe Willock, who may move towards the left, Joe Linton may move towards that because they can interchange. I think that's a massive area of the football pitch, and I think at St James's, if Newcastle can get the better of the midfield, I think your defence is a little bit all over the place. I really do. That defence does not worry me.
Score prediction?
I think it'll be close, but I think Newcastle win. I think Newcastle win 3-1.
3-1. Wow. Sim, what are you going for?
I think Newcastle are winning. I think 2-0. I don't think we're scoring. I think Newcastle have more fight right now, and they believe. We just crumble under any sort of pressure. And Newcastle, one thing you can guarantee is pressure right now, the way they play. And I can't see us not buckling under it, to be honest.
Yeah. I think there's going to be, I think the Newcastle fans are going to be bang up for it. I'm sure you're going to have some tifos planned and all the rest of it. So when your players respond to that crowd action, I mean, I cannot see anything positive in this game for Tottenham. I really can't. And maybe we'll get a goal, but I think our defence will completely falter at St James's Park this weekend. And I think I'm going to agree with you, Johnny. I'm going to go for 3-1 to Newcastle, much to your delight. But that is our preview. We're going to do a combined 11 as well, so watch out for that. But Johnny, thank you so much for coming on today. And everyone, do go and subscribe to Newcastle Fans TV. Really good Newcastle content. But Johnny, thank you so much for coming on today, mate.
No problem at all, anytime.